So the only impersonation I'll do is Alf. Hey, Willie!
Basically, Sin City is 300 with suits.
Making copies.
Time Cop 2.
I think it's a required skill if you're going to work on the state highway.
Long cocaine nail on his pinky.
I am the law!
In fact, both you went, is how you end the show.
Hello and welcome to Movie
Hello and welcome to Movie Smash, the podcast that looks at comic book movies outside the MCU that you may or may not remember. If you're the type of person that enjoys talking about hidden gems or just like to tear old movies apart, this is the place for you. With that, let's get started. I'm one of your hosts, Chris Roberts. I'm the founder of Off Panel Creations. With me today, I have Jeremy Parmentier.
Hi, I'm Jeremy Parmentier, the Retrovaniacs podcast, and also the band Subtastics. And it turns out this movie has stolen my nickname, Mr. Furious.
I'm not sure how one tops that.
And Fergel Amayo.
Well, that would be me, owner and purveyor of comics with Gotham Knight Comics, where we get our nerd on. And I also happen to be a massive fan of being a fork flinger, if you will. And you'll hear me reference that quite a bit because I am a fan of Blue Raja.
I'm surprised you guys didn't come up with new superhero names for yourself considering this movie. Our movie today is 1999's Mystery Men, starring Ben Stiller, Janeane Garofalo, William H. Macy, Hank Azaria, Kel Mitchell, and post-scandal Paul Rubin, just to name a few, and directed by Kinka Usher. Before we get started, guys, how familiar were you with the comic book itself and the characters in there?
I knew the book. I actually read the book. I had it for when it was aardvark when it first came out. I liked the Flaming Carrot. I was definitely a fan of it, and that's what was disappointing. But I liked the Flaming Carrot a lot, and I think this is an interesting story. I like the Eddie Man powers. Who doesn't? Or Mr. Furious.
I knew this was a comic. Again, this is around the same time frame. Actually, a lot of these movies were done around the same time frame. I worked in the comic store and knew a lot of people. So I knew this was a comic. I knew Flaming Carrot, but I didn't know the rest of these characters and kind of know they were tied together. So after I saw the movie, I did go back out and find some of the original source material, which I'm glad I did. I don't think this necessarily is like a direct translation of the original material, but it takes the concepts and works with it. So I again, did not know it at the time, but I knew it was a comic.
And for me, I actually did not know this was a comic. Even after we selected the movie, I had to go look it up. Had no idea this is a comic. So do you guys remember when you actually saw this movie for the first time?
Yes. And actually, when I rewatched the movie, I was thinking about that as I was watching the movie because I actually tried to bring my wife into this movie, and which created a unique situation because some parts she liked and some parts she was like, "What the hell am I watching?" But I remember the last scene, and I was like, "Wow, that brought my back like the buzz I had when I was in the theater seeing this movie with my friends."
Yeah, I definitely remember seeing this in the theater with my friends. Again, all my comic friends, we were all kind of into the same sort of idea. Like this has very kind of that same, we talked about Turtles when we did the Turtles episode, the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles episode, and there was a whole time frame where I was going out and finding these independent black and white comics that had these kind of, I don't want to say underpowered or non-powered superheroes that were kind of making fun as tongue-in-cheek of the superhero motifs and everything, but I liked them. So this is something I'm surprised I hadn't read before, but I like this sort of thing. So we definitely saw it in the theater and loved it, even though we weren't familiar with the source material.
I remember that I saw this in theaters when it came out. I don't remember who I was with. These are my college years, so it could have been anybody. But I do remember enjoying it at the time.
That was all a blur.
Yeah, college was a little bit all of a blur at that time. But what were your initial impressions when you saw this movie the first time?
Well, I'll tell you, when we talked about doing this again, the one thing that flashed in my mind is the pool scene where they're doing the tryouts for all the heroes, like the other heroes that end up not, kind of making it on the team. That's what I remember about this movie the most. The fact that it was actually a lot more than that when I watched it through this time again. There's a lot I remembered as I saw it. But what I remember the most about it was the idea of these like non-real superheroes, like a guy that just, he holds a toaster and that's his superpower. Like I love that. When I was in Chris, when we were in high school, we used to play, some pen and paper role playing games. One of them was the game Champions, where you make superheroes. And so it was always fun to try to make the dumbest possible superheroes that somehow still had the most damaging attacks, even though they're the absolute stupidest thing you could possibly do. That's what this movie reminded me of. And so, I remember laughing a lot at it and thinking, wow, this fits right in with what I'm doing outside of movies and outside of comics. Like these board games that we're playing, this all fit in with that. So I loved it at the time.
So it's interesting, and I didn't play a ton of board games. So my board game experience kind of begins and ends at D&D, which and then led into ElfQuest, which isn't interesting. But I do remember the comic. What I thought about this movie was that there's a lot of really funny characters in this movie, strong comedic actors, right? Ben Stiller, I mean, Janeane Garofalo, just Dane Cook. I mean, just a ton of people throughout this entire movie. I thought, wow, this is pretty sweet, and I absolutely just love the way they all came together, right? If you looked at this and you looked at Ben Stiller, you could see Zoolander in this movie. Like I think it was just they. I think they were all having just a blast shooting this film. That's what I was just thinking of myself as I was watching this and just going through it. That's my thoughts on that.
So it's funny you say that, Jeremy. I remember us playing that game, Champions, back in the day. And when I watched this movie again, I had this image of, I think it was your character, that whenever he would enter a room, his theme music would play behind him.
Yeah, that was my special power. I have a band that would play behind me. It wasn't a soft band.
Did you steal that from "I'm Gonna Get You, Sucker"?
Oh, probably. I mean, it was this high school. I'm sure there's plenty of ideas. Even if it wasn't stolen intentionally, I'm sure it was something I saw and was like, that's hilarious. But I used it because the idea was I would be sneaking. Whenever I was trying to sneak, I would have this band play behind me. But it was this loud ska band. So it wasn't even like it was a quiet band. It was just this loud ska band. It was the same exact game where someone else, so in Champions, you had to build characters that had flaws. And we were
Yeah.
the most ridiculous flaws. So mine was if the temperature got over 100 degrees, I would turn into a goat. And one of the other guys in our group, his weakness was if he ever saw a goat, he had to pet it. So we made sure to all these areas where we would get in really hot areas, and then it would just be him petting me like a goat for no reason, nonstop. Sure, out we're sharing, but I still felt like sharing it anyway.
That's phenomenal.
So I remember during that time, my character had two gloves, one that would heal, one that would hurt. And his weakness was he was too dumb to remember which glove did which. And it was always random which one he would use when attacking the opponent. But that's not Mystery Men. So back to Mystery Men. What do we know about the comic?
Yeah, so written, created by Bob Burden, Flaming Carrot Comics. I'll give you a couple interesting tidbits. It won an Eisner Award for Best Humor Publication, which is obviously a very hard award to get. Interesting storyline. And why I mentioned a couple things that, are like, where was this? Like the Flaming Carrot is what this is based off of, which is the main character who read 5,000 comic books and his brain went to mush and he had to become a superhero. And he actually wore a big flaming carrot in his head and went into a zen of stupidity and was amazing. And there were a lot of little fun, dumb characters like that. Just like your game is what this book is based off of. So it's and Jeremy, I know you read the book recently, so that's kind of what it comes down to. So he created the Mystery Man, had a huge run from '84 to '06. It's just a great book all around.
Nice. So if this is your first time joining us, just a quick heads up. We're about to discuss the plot of this very 90s movie, and we're going to discuss some elements, some scenes, some characters that might be considered spoilers. So if you want to watch this movie in advance, go catch it, come on back, but consider yourself warned. Now, this movie follows a group of three inept amateur wannabe superheroes who need to save the city from the recently released Casanova Frankenstein. After an encounter, they realize they are quite underpowered and need to recruit fellow heroes to join their cause. The group ends up being the fork-fling Blue Raja, the Shoveler, the Bowler, the Spleen, the Invisible Boy, the Sphinx, and Mr. Furious. And together, they need to go back, fight Casanova Frankenstein and his disco thugs.
When a city is in the grip of fear and on the brink of disaster,
Kaboom!
who among us will take a stand against the forces of evil?
Daddy is home.
Universal Pictures presents a new League of Heroes.
Let's do some carnage.
Yo, what's up, Tiger Lily?
This summer, expect the unexpected.
Wow.
Ben Stiller, William H. Macy, Hank Azaria, Janeane Garofalo, Kel Mitchell, Greg Kinnear, Claire Forlani, Paul Rubens, and Jeffrey Rush.
Hang on.
Mystery Men.
I don't find you threatening.
Oh, well, you're kind.
At all.
So why don't we jump into this movie, guys, and start with the characters? How'd they put it? It was a cadre of heroes.
Yes. Definitely, it was a cadre of heroes, and the villains were equally a cadre amongst themselves.
There you go. So there are quite a few characters. Which ones stand out to you guys the most?
Blue Raja, Mr. Furious, because his power, and I was kind of disappointed there when you introduced Mr. Furious as the leader, because you forgot to say afterwards, and his power is to have boundless furious rage. Because I think I just think the way he plays a character with absolutely zero power, except his anger, makes me laugh. But obviously, one cannot speak without thinking of Blue Raja, because he is the fork flinger, and I just think he's amazing. I just think he portrays that with such abandon. Fun movie.
But when I watched it the first time, and what I remembered was, Mr. Furious, obviously. I remembered the Blue Raja. I remembered the Shoveler, who I thought was hilarious because his power is just that he has a shovel and he hits people with it, right? Like those were the most amazing powers. But on this rewatch, and the Invisible Boy. By the way, the Invisible Boy has the best power ever. He's invisible, but only if nobody's looking at him, which is
That's
incredible.
awesome.
I absolutely love Invisible Boy. But they all have these great, like, kind of bizarre powers that are arguably real or not, right? But the Blue Raja, I just remember, like, yeah, he was there. On this watch, Hank Azaria steals this movie. He is the most incredible character. He's got all this stuff that I totally had forgotten about, other than the fact that he makes incredible fork and spoon puns nonstop, which is my favorite thing about him. But it's also all the stuff dealing with his mom and everything else. I'm like, this character is absolutely the best part of this movie. And if I wouldn't have watched it again now, I would have totally forgotten how good he is in this.
Agreed. I'm just going to throw that out there. The puns, the fork, when he mentioned about that not having brought the cake knife, that was phenomenal.
So yeah, the puns are amazing for this. If you're a dad, you will love this movie. The scene in the diner where the Shoveler, Mr. Furious, and Blue Raja are talking after that first encounter at the old folks' home. According to the director's commentary, there is a guy in the background. You can see him behind the Blue Raja on occasion. And he's actually back there writing more fork and pun jokes as they're shooting. So after they do a take, he would then hand them the new jokes and then start doing those.
You could never have enough.
The guy is actually a friend of the director or someone he's worked with when he used to do commercials. I really do like the Invisible Boy. I mean, it's hilarious. His power is only, how do they put it? It's only works if nobody's looking at him.
That's right. And then when he walks in, brings him into the house, he's like, "Hey, Dad, just bringing these 7 strange men into my bedroom."
I would love it if, eventually you find out, does his power actually work? The answer is yes. But I would have loved it if we never found out, right? So the question is, did they just bring a minor into this crime fighting scenario, and we never know if that he actually has a power or not?
Yeah, you don't know. And yes, in the movie, it kind of says that it shows that he quote does, but at the same time, no one's really watching. So no one really knows. He thinks it's working, so that's what we see as his version of what happened.
That's
Perhaps.
right. That's right. Which is the best part of the movie. See, Jeremy just went cerebral on the whole thought process. I completely appreciate that.
I do love the Shoveler, though. I do love how he is the most serious character of all of them, and this in the sense of he's doing it for the heroics. He's doing it to fight evil. He's doing it to make the world a better place for his family that he has at home. And Macy does it so dry. It is amazing.
Yes. And then when you get home, you get the African American. It's got a very mixed. So back in '94, you didn't see a lot of mixed family representation on TV. So that was phenomenal. And they got great actors. Being a mixed gentleman myself, I tend to like these things.
Originally, that character, the Shoveler, was supposed to be played by Danny DeVito.
I'm glad that didn't happen. I like Danny DeVito a lot, but I think he wouldn't have played it as serious as William H. Macy did. What I also liked about the Shoveler, and I wouldn't have enjoyed this the first time because I wouldn't have made this connection. I like that he goes out, he does this superhero thing. He's doing what he's like, this is my dream. This is what I'm going to do. And he always gets home and his wife's just like, yeah, you got to hang this up soon. Like, what are you doing? Much like my wife does every time I record a podcast. So I felt
So you're saying you identify with the Shoveler a little bit?
Yeah, a little bit. A guy who's following what he thinks the right thing is to do, but realize everyone around him in his real life is like, yeah, this is fun and all, but let's put that shovel away.
But here's the thing: you shovel well, and if your wife is like the movie character, she'd be like, "You damn sure do." So you shovel well.
Now, what I found interesting was Macy actually went out and took lessons for shovel fighting. And I don't know what's more interesting, the fact that he was that dedicated to this character to go learn how to fight with a shovel, or that someone actually teaches how to fight with a shovel.
Oh no, yeah, I just think that would be an interesting skill to have. I actually think that would be more relevant than other skill sets. We all have shovels at home.
I think it's a required skill if you're going to work on the State Highway Administration.
So how'd you guys feel about? We haven't really sort of touched on the spleen character, Paul Rubens.
I was a little like at first I was like, okay, why is Paul Rubens in a movie? But he carried himself well. The farts were funny. The farts, I mean the end scene, the farts were great. Like when he's like checking wind and speed temperature, and he's like, he who smelt it shall always dealt it. I thought that was pretty interesting. But again, I was a little surprised when I saw him. I was like, isn't he supposed to be out of movies? Because wasn't this after the theater incident?
This
Yes.
was.
This was
Okay, just want to be clear on that one.
it wasn't the first thing he did after it, but it was one of his earlier like returns to trying to do things. And he wasn't in it as Pee Wee Herman, to be fair. He was in it as Paul Rubens and as a disgusting superhero with fart powers. I do want to give him full credit because it's really tough to make anyone that's farting as like their main thing not be like just really like the first time you're like, okay, but then you just like never do that again. Like this is not a movie for children. I don't want to watch this. But instead it actually really works and was still funny every time he did it.
Yes.
I wasn't really sure which way you were going to go with that one. I was afraid you were going to say that once you have a scandal, it's really hard to come back to work.
No, well, that's like a podcast with you guys. It's fair.
Actually, that doesn't seem hard at all. I think the part where he's talking about farting and holding it off in a good way, that seems hard. Now, obviously, we all fart. I'm not sure if you do it omnidirectional or if you got the pointing skills, but Paul Rubens does pull it off without any sort of thing, and the people sort of fall over in perfect, succinct order. And I thought that was great.
The now Captain Amazing, I think he was like the early Homelander. What do you guys think?
Yes. Yeah, very much. It's very much the same way Homelander is, but different. Like Homelander, I mean, later on, I guess I don't want to spoil that because that's still out, but it's not quite the same. Like Captain Amazing, they have the thing where they're supposed to be like the ultimate superhero, right? So they're a Superman sort of, right? The difference is Captain Amazing, instead of having some kind of nefarious plan, he's just based in greed. He's covered in different sponsorships. So he looks like a NASCAR driver, which I absolutely loved. And the whole reason that this movie happens is because he decides to break Casanova Frankenstein out of jail because he's captured all the other superheroes or killed them, and he needs a bad guy so he can continue to get his sponsorships. Like it's not even like he's got this ultimate dark side. He's just like, no, if I don't have a villain, then I can't keep getting paid. So let's get a villain. And like that's how the whole movie starts. So he's not. I don't know. It's not where you find out. Like I had assumed the first time you'd find out like he's, and I guess we're going to spoil the movie anyway. He's like the ultimate bad guy, right? Like really, he's behind all this. No, he just he's yes, he kicked it off, but he didn't have any ill intent other than, hey, I got to make sure I keep my Coca-Cola sponsorship. I love it. It's great.
Agreed. And I mean, on a lot of that, I agree, but I also I was a little, I don't know if I could make the stretch for Homelander representation because I've seen the boys all through the seasons, and every time I watch that show or even read that book, I'm like, wow, these guys know no bounds. So I don't know if I'd make the comparison, but I do think he is a greedy dude. And I'm always curious because I've been watching this thing. I watched that scene a couple times. Is his powers technological or actually him? I personally believe he's just basically Batman, but greedy.
I think he's an Iron Man.
Oh yeah,
Okay.
it could be, and it's either way. He's like the only true superhero out of these guys you meet at the beginning. Like he's
No, Invisiboy and the Sphinx did it.
Invisible, we still haven't quite determined if he actually has any powers. The Sphinx does, but he's like an older. I thought he was more kind of like the older Batman character, right? That comes in that kind of teaches him what to do, like Dark Knight era Batman, right? But still, like I thought Captain Amazing was. It's still that Iron Man could be right. I don't know if it's the suit that's the power of him, but and that's why I think the comparison to Homelander is not as much the story and the arc, because yes, the boys is a totally different bag than this is, but the idea that you have this like ultimate superhero, but something's not quite right. So that's the same kind of idea. You have Captain Amazing. He seems like the oh, he's clearly an ultimate superhero, but then when it comes down, he has an agent and he has a PR person and he has all this stuff where he's trying to like, yeah, I want to make sure everyone knows how great I am. I better find another villain again. Where I think that's the comparison to Homelander, is that behind the scenes, Homelander's not really like the best guy ever, and I think the same thing for Captain Amazing.
So yeah, for me, it's really the fact that he has a publicist, right? He's looking at this more as a corporate gig than he is, I'm here to defend humanity. He frees Casanova Frankenstein just so he has a better villain, because was it Dr. Death is dead?
Yeah.
Well, and keep in mind that Gunther. So, if any of you guys are a Bond fan, I think both of you guys are both Bond fans. There's that one Bond movie with Pierce Brosnan. I can't remember the little snivelly guy, but it's the media guy. And the bad guy, Gunter, or the dude who does the GPS, that's the publicist in this movie. I can't remember his name, but you can never forget the unmistakable little snivelly look that he has.
Well, the publicist in this one, his name was Ricky James.
That's the guy from the Tomorrow Never Dies, I believe.
Funny thing about him is he holds a Guinness World Record for throwing a playing card 190 feet. He can also throw a playing card so hard it can pierce a watermelon.
That guy?
In actual real life. Like, if anyone has superhero powers, it's this guy.
The publicist?
Yeah, the publicist has the Guinness Book of World Records for throwing a playing card 190 feet and can throw it so hard he can pierce a watermelon.
Like Gambit? That's kind of
Yes.
interesting. Okay. You've got me on a throwback on that one.
Which makes it even funnier that, he's the publicist. we sort of hinted a little bit about Casanova Frankenstein. He's the big villain. He's the big bad. Of the cadre of villains, what do you guys think?
He's awesome. I think the way Jeffrey Rush is not known to play these kind of characters. So like everybody else in that movie was a serious comedic actor. I mean, they were at some point, even Greg Kinnear, they have comedic chops, but Jeffrey Rush, he just does not do a lot of comedy movies. So to see him kind of play that off and do that with the little nails and I'm reformed. I love the city. I just love that.
Well, the bad guys in this are very much that, if you're going to be a bunch of superheroes that don't have superpowers and just have these other abilities, the bad guys are fighting are kind of the same. They have guns. They like disco music. They aren't shooting laser ray eyes or anything. Really, the only person that has any sort of, and really a superpower is just that he's like super smart, I guess, and able to build a bunch of machines is Casanova Frankenstein. But everybody else is like these kind of off-kilter gang member sort of things. It reminded me a lot of, I don't know if you guys are fans of The Tick, either the comic or the cartoon.
Yes, and his sidekick Arthur. Let's not forget about him.
Oh no, you can't ever forget about Arthur. But there's one of the earlier episodes where the one where Chairface Chippendale is going to write his name across the moon, and he has all the criminals there. I know it's supposed to kind of be like Dick Tracy. It's all the same, but that's exactly what these bad guys remind me of. It's that same idea as the Chairface Chippendale gang, where he has all these other enemies around wherever that are just kind of like comic book bad guys, and these are the same idea. I love that. Instead of having a whole bunch of like really defined super villains with super villain abilities, it's like, no, there's one, and then there's just guys with guns that are bad guys. Like, that's fine.
I think Jeremy is trying to say he loved the shrinking gun for the girls.
I do love the scene where the core three, Blue Raja, Shoveler, Mr. Furious, come to Casanova Frankenstein's house for the first time, and they meet the Disco Boys, one played by Eddie Izzard. And they're confused by the fact that they have guns, and they start telling them that it's off theme. They start giving him tips, such as, your chain should be gold, and why are you carrying a lead pipe? And then, of course, the bad guys don't care, just beat the guys into a pulp.
Yes.
Now, which is even more interesting is that they then take on, later on, they meet a mad scientist named Dr. Heller and take on his, use him to get some weapons. One of those weapons you just mentioned, Fergel, being the shrinking ray. What do you guys think of Dr. Heller?
I think he's another funny character, and I think the way he he comes off kind of weird, but when he introduces himself, he's really funny. And then the whole the tornado can thing where that captures the spleen. I just love the way his weapons look.
I love that it's Tom Waits. I mean, it's the perfect kind of guy who lived in an old carnival. It fits perfectly.
On the director's commentary, he talks about how Waits kept forgetting his lines, so he wrote them on his fingers, and that's why you see him moving his fingers around in weird ways. He's trying to see the lines.
That's incredible.
See, I told you these guys had a lot of fun made in this movie.
Scenes-wise, what's your favorite scene?
Ending scene. I think the ending when they're like with Invisiboy and with Mr. Furious, and when Blue Raja just does his whole fork thing from underneath, and I thought that was the coolest scene. The Shoveler took on, was it the Disco Boys? He did well in that fight with the Disco Boys. He even came up with the Disco Boy who disarmed him, and he had a little shovel.
I've already mentioned the audition scene where they are trying to find other people to join their superhero group, and that's where they get the bowler to join. And I love that's when you mentioned Dane Cook's in the movie. He's in it just for that one scene. He's in there as a character that has a bad superpower. And there's all these other characters that come in. They're like, nope, next. I love that. That's my favorite scene in the movie. But I do like the end that Fergel just mentioned. I think it's really good. I also like Um, again, all the scenes with the Blue Raja and his mom, who's kind of like,
Yes.
"What is it you do again?" And he's trying to explain to her, and that's when he falls out of his character because he's like, "Come on, mom, leave me alone." Normally, he's trying to convince everybody why he's named the Blue Raja, but he's from England. Oh, it's so good.
I love the pool scene too. They throw so many jokes into it, just one after another. And, you know, you get nice little cameos like Doug Jones playing Pencilhead and the son of Pencilhead.
Yes, yes, a PMS girl. I only work 4 days a month. Is that all right? Yep.
So we've mentioned Dan Cook a couple times, and during that scene, he plays the Waffler.
Yes, he
And
was.
the way it happened was Ben Stiller actually knew him, invited him on set to come and play this part, and told him, "Hey, you're the Waffler." And Dan Cook asked, "What should I wear?" He said, "Wear whatever you want." And when he gets there, he's got that burn mark on his shirt. He's got the syrup in the back pocket. And Ben Stiller lets him know, when I said Waffler, I meant the fact that your superpower is your inability to make decisions, not that you like waffles. So they changed it to the Waffler that we know and love today.
Well, that's interesting. I did like that audition scene. I especially like when the bowler came. Janeane Garofalo played the bowler well. Like that, I would have loved to learn a little bit more about, again, even though we knew Carmine, I'd love to have just seen a flashback to Big Bowler, obviously the head that was in the bowling ball, because that was a bit of a superpower.
Yeah, because that bowling ball of hers can fly on its own.
Yes, it could.
Janeane Garofalo's parents actually met in a bowling alley, and she herself does not know how to bowl, and that ball was about 30 pounds that she had to learn how to swing. It's funny, of all the director commentaries I've watched or listened to over the years, this has got to be one of the best, just because he does not care. Before this movie, he only directed commercials. He did the Got Milk ads. He did the Taco Bell Chihuahua ads. But after this experience, he said that he was never going back to do movies again, and he never did. And he went back to doing commercials. He said it was so much easier just doing 1-minute ads.
Well, hopefully, he didn't make that Quiznos subset of ads. Those were terrible.
As you hear him talk about it, this is a guy who's never done this before, and you can also tell he's a guy who never wants to do it again.
I will tell you a better. I admittedly have not listened to this commentary track. If you're looking for a commentary track, it has nothing to do with Mystery Man. I just want to throw it out there. If you can find any version of Spinal Tap, it has the hands down best commentary track because it's everybody in character talking about it as if they really made this documentary about their band. It's incredible.
Oh, that would be awesome. I've watched Spinal Tap. It's a great movie too.
I think they're coming out with a sequel, aren't they?
Yes, they are.
So for being a late 90s movie, how do you guys feel about the CGI, the practical effects?
The special effects were really 1994. Actually, I think they purposely sharknadoed the special effects to kind of poke fun at the whole genre. What do you think?
Yeah, I don't know if it was intentional or not. The special effects are not going to blow you away, but they are not all over the place. It's not like there's, with the exception of the whatever the ultimate weapon is that Casanova Frankenstein builds that ends up, you get to see people kind of getting warped by this thing. That's the only effect that's kind of over the top. And even then it's fine because it is. So it's such a funny movie more than a serious movie that it's okay that the effects aren't very good. That said, it's still better than 99% of what's on the Sci-Fi Channel today. So it's still not terrible. Almost everyone's superhero abilities, even Captain Fantastic or whatever his name is, all those effects are fairly just people fighting. They're practical effects. There's not a ton outside of some of the stuff with a bowler that really needs a lot of special effects. I mean, I guess the farting effect, but that's still kind of practical special effects, right? You're not seeing a lot of CG. So the stuff that is fine, that it's kind of goofy because it's where it needs to be.
I think you're right. When it comes to the effects, the CGI is passable for a late 90s movie. But the thing, this movie has a lot of practical effects. I'm thinking in particular about the scene where Mr. Furious, the guy who starts the band, who doesn't know how to play an instrument, is fighting Casanova Frankenstein, and Frankenstein is attacking him with his long cocaine nail on his pinky. It's actually the setup. Yeah, the setup is actually a giant finger they attach to the camera and chase them around with it.
And it's obvious that's what it is, and it's perfect for this kind of movie.
Exactly, and it's like I said, and the way they approached it was to make this movie as much like a comic book as possible. So a lot of their camera shots are wide lenses where you get to see like the background behind them, or they're really tight face shots. So sometimes you'll see where the Shelver's talking to his wife and she puts her rubber hands around his face to to comfort him.
Yes.
to give those sort of feel of like what a comic book would look like. We had either super zoomed in on someone's face or like you're seeing the backgrounds and everything.
Yes, and obviously the Blue Raja putting those forks up the wall, that was dope. That was so cool.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up. I forgot to bring that up too. The forks. So to make those forks fly across the room, they actually made a slingshot designed to fire forks at people. So when you see a fork slam into somebody's ass, that is a real fork being shot at somebody with this gun, the slingshot.
Did you get to keep it after it was over?
I don't know about that, but it was it looked pretty interesting to watch. So what do you guys think about that first intro scene of the old folks club that sort of opens this movie up to us?
I think it sort of sets the tone that these guys are the kind of the wannabes. They're the kind of guys that woke up one day and decided they're going to be superheroes. And it's just, they read, you can believe. So that's what they got right about the comic book. So the comic book is all about this guy who reads 5,000 comic books, which I guess that would make me if you're really thinking about it, and becomes kind of crazy and ends up, becoming a superhero, which I own a motorcycle. There is a real possibility I may put on Kevlar armor and patrol the streets at some point. But I think the first scene in the movie kind of breaks that out. Just shows that these are just regular guys that were like, and they just got their butts kicked. And even the bad guys were regular guys, and they did the kicking of the butts.
Yeah, I think it's a great introduction to the fact that these are kind of not even second or third tier heroes. They're not even invited to the West Coast Avengers. They're not heroes. Like, they're just guys that think they can be superheroes. And meanwhile, they get saved by an actual superhero. And they're like, yeah, well, we're buds. And he's like, who are these guys? Like, I love that. It totally sets the pace for who we're watching. We're watching like the loser superheroes, and it works out perfect.
Now, this movie had a lot of rewrites. A lot of lines were improv. A lot of editing was done. A lot of work was done behind the scenes in this movie. And every one of those stars really wanted to be the guy that got the last word in. So how do you feel about the tone in this movie?
It doesn't take itself seriously, and I don't know. I mean, if they did have to rewrite a bunch because people wanted to be top bill, I don't think that came across. I thought it came across that, I mean, Ben Stiller kind of is the top bill in this. Arguably, the William H. Macy is kind of there as well, but really, it seems like it's Ben Stiller's movie that he put his friends in. Now, that may not be true at all. It may be that they had a bunch of people fighting over who ends up being top billing, but instead, I think everybody had a good chance to flesh their character out more. But it still felt like this was Ben Stiller movie that other people were in, and I think, like I said earlier, I think Hank Azaria steals it, but it's not a Hank Azaria movie. There's not enough of him to make it a Hank Azaria movie. There is enough to make it a Ben Stiller movie.
Agreed. I totally agree with you. I know it was definitely a Ben Stiller. I think he was kind of, and I think part of what I've heard, at least in my own research, is that he sort of really pushed to want to make this movie. This is a movie that was something that was kind of fun for him to want to do. So that would lead to that process. But to agree with Jeremy yet again, Blue Raja stole the show. Blue Raja was the fourth flinger to be known. But the whole thing works, even if they were at each other's throats, because you had a director who didn't direct movies and was probably so far on his death trying to manage all these big personalities that he did his best work in trying to cut these scenes together almost like small little bites that you can just take in.
It's funny you say that because Ben Stiller actually did not want to do this movie. Janeane Garofalo had to actually convince him to come and do this movie. And there was even a point where he wanted to quit during the filming because he had a falling out with Captain Amazing, Greg Kinnear. And he had to be convinced to stay and finish up filming for this thing.
See how wrong the internet can be?
I know. The interesting thing about this, too, is the original director for this was supposed to be Danny DeVito. He's supposed to not only star in it, but also direct this thing. And he decided not to because he wanted control over the soundtrack for the movie, and they said no.
Really? That's interesting. I think everything worked. This is one of those movies that everything works for that. Sort of like you guys all remember, how the Avengers, when it all came together and they're in that scene in New York, everybody, I mean, it doesn't matter where you're at. Everybody remembers what that felt like. That's like watching a real comic book come to life in a way that has not been done before. That's, I think, what made this movie unique on the opposite side, because it's just a bunch of really top talent getting together and making a really funny movie.
Oh, I agree with you. Like it's at the end of the day, this thing when it's all finalized, it feels cohesive. And there's the girlfriend storyline that just goes nowhere. Yeah. But beyond that, the whole thing feels really good, cohesive. It feels like a bunch of people who not necessarily liked each other, but came together, and they are that final group of superheroes. Clocking in just over 2 hours. How was the pacing for this movie?
I had my wife watching, so I had to kind of fast forward like a few parts. I had to keep her attention.
I don't think this is paced poorly. Again, as long as you want the background of the characters. I guess if you don't want that, if you're watching this movie and you're like, I don't care about the background to the Invisible Boy, I don't care about the background to the Blue Raja, which again, if you're doing, you're missing out on my favorite parts of the movie. Then maybe there's some slow parts. I guess if you're looking for all action, this is not the superhero movie for you. But if you like that kind of lovable loser superhero group, so they have to go do their real life stuff in the side. It has to be part of that. Then I think it's fine. But I guess if you're looking for an action packed hero movie, then there's a lot to skip.
Personally, I love the pacing of this movie. I mean, if you look at if you as a viewer, that first scene of the old folks home, if you don't laugh during that, you're gonna hate the rest of this movie, right? And it doesn't matter how fast or slow it goes after that point. It's if for me, I just love the humor. I love the comedy that's in there. It could have been another hour long. I think I probably still would have laughed at it. At the end of the day, guys, what do you love about the movie? What do you think they could have done better?
Oh, I think they did. From the way that this movie was made, this was again, I think we said it really well in the last part. It's just really put together well. All the characters kind of, and I think when he gets super furious, you gotta love that. And then they put the $6 million man sound when he jumps off the step. You gotta love that. That was unnecessarily fun. CG. I think the only things that you could do better when you look at it on like a 4K TV, and it didn't age as well as other movies of its period.
Yeah, but I don't think you can hold that against the movie because it's not. I don't know. It was not. I'm sure it had a budget, but it's not like the Avengers. It's not this massive super budget movie. It's still, it's a major movie, but it's not a massive movie. I don't know. I think it sets the tone really well for the kind of movie I like. Like I don't think we've reviewed a movie yet that hits my sense of humor as hard as this does. Like we've watched some things that are maybe unintentionally funny, like Time Cop, but it also tried to be funny. The things that were funny or were trying to be funny were like, ugh. But this like I laughed. I honestly laughed a bunch at this movie. I don't know what I would do differently. If anything, I guess, and this is, I don't know if you could do this and make it work. Is that I don't think that the actual like supervillain plan is that good. I think it could be more interesting. It's not bad, but it's just like, okay, he just wants to destroy the city somehow. Like there's not, I don't know. It could have been a better a better set of maybe the major villain could do something differently at the end. I don't know, but I wouldn't change the actual build of the movie. I like the fact that you kind of have to slowly learn about these guys and then see them try to awkwardly fumble their way to success. I love that. So I don't know what I would change at all. If anything, again, I think just the actual Castle of Frankenstein's actual plot is maybe not explained as well as it needs to be.
I would have to agree. Humor wise, this is my kind of movie. It's not slapsticky. There are a lot of great puns. It's clever, double entendres. And every time you watch it, you'll find something new to laugh at. It's like the kind of humor you find in Dr. Horrible's sing-along blog.
I think it's good for the group. Double entendre, would you mind giving our massive audience an explanation?
Well, if you need an explanation for how the word double entendre works, then get yourself a dictionary. So, but more importantly, I think that what they could have done better was there were some slower parts, like the working with the Sphinx, a little bit of training there. But nonetheless, I would want more. But that's just me, and that's just because I think for what they made, it was great for the time.
Agreed.
So for future this, guys, should people go out and find this movie?
Yes.
Yes, 100%. I've got this movie on DVD. I've got the Tick cartoon series on DVD. I like this sort of humor, this kind of, again, lovable loser superhero groups. So this is, I think, one of the better examples of things like this. Again, it doesn't try to go too hard into slapstick. It doesn't try too hard to be funny. It's just funny. Like it's doing funny things, putting people in funny situations, but it's not just a superhero movie with a bunch of terrible one-liners, which is what this could have been, and it's thankfully not.
So it sounds like this might be one of the, if you could only bring two movies with you to a deserted island, it's this and The Tick.
Well, I mean, yes. I'm looking for superhero movies, correct. Those are the things superhero things. I guess
I'm going to probably change it to Avengers in this, but yes, I'm right there with Jeremy.
But yeah, people should go seek this out. I mean, it's an older movie. If you're looking for a shake-up for the current comic book world, go watch this thing. You'll have a good laugh. So I take it you both would be willing to go rewatch this thing.
I have a couple times. I wanted to make sure I didn't miss anything as I was watching it, because I just thought the explanation of how the last scene when his mom gave him the silver set and he was like, oh, we're not, I thought I was saving this for the wedding, but we're not doing that. So I guess go fight crime. I just thought phenomenal. He was like, "Oh, mom." So yeah, I think you should watch this movie. I just think you'll love the movie. I think you'll literally think these are funny characters doing really interesting things.
Yeah, this is a great movie. I cannot recommend this enough. If you have a sense of humor at all and want something different than your standard Marvel movie, this is great.
Speaking of the Blue Raja, if you guys have the Blu-ray or the DVD, I guess there is an extended scene of the Blue Raja talking to his mother, as well as him at his day job selling flatware for wedding registries, and he's talking to a bride and groom about which silverware to choose.
That makes sense. That just completely makes sense. He was inspired to save the world through his cutlery.
I know we're completely off topic here, but I love the fact that he creates such a huge backstory as why the Blue Raja makes sense.
And gets mad that people don't get it, and explains how mad he is that no one gets his backstory. It's great. I'm telling you, this watch through this movie, everything hit exactly right. And maybe it's because I watched it and I was completely sober, as opposed to when I watched it when I was younger. I didn't watch it late at night. I didn't watch it with other people. I watched it by myself, sitting there, and there were all these things that hit exactly on. That was one of them. Also, just the whole idea of the Invisible Boy being a superhero that's only invisible, no one looks at him. I know it seems real simple, but the more that like you watch everyone's reaction to him explaining his own power, it's incredible.
That's half the fun of this movie. There are just so many layers. Like Mr. Furious gets angry. It does nothing for him. He's just angry.
He gets mad. He's boundless furious. He's even trying to downplay his own superpower at the end of the movie. She's like, no, he has his boundless range.
And he loses power the moment somebody likes him as a person.
Yeah, the moment they tell him to use his real name.
But when he was scraping the Corvette in the thing, he's trying to pry off the label at the front of the Corvette. That was great. He was like, "Ah!"
Given how long has gone by this movie, do you think they should remake this movie or revisit this world?
I don't think you could. I mean, there's just movies that, when they hit comedically, I don't think they can be remade, right? And I think this is kind of one of them that you'd have to. I mean, I don't think you can remake it. And speaking of remakes, sometimes it's not always necessary.
Yeah, I don't think you need to remake this or revisit this world. Now, again, you did bring up this as part of the Flaming Carrot world. I'm sure you could find things in this series that would be worth redoing, but I would not redo this. And I think there's also other solid versions of this same idea. These kind of superheroes or non super powered superheroes that are kind of out of the fourth tier superheroes. Like there's plenty of those to build from if you want to build a movie like this. You don't need to revisit the Mystery Men.
Yeah, I'm not normally against remakes. I mean, technology changes, the screenwriting ability changes, production changes. But with comedies in particular, it is hard to remake those things because you'll always be, comparing the comedy chops of one group versus another group. Now, I would love to see them come out with another movie similar to this, where people be like, it feels like a Mystery Men, but it's new, it's different. I would love to see that because I love this kind of humor. I love to see that, that the inept superhero making his way, like the Tick. Like I love the Tick. That was such a great miniseries, a great cartoon, just amazing.
Even the Tick live action series, which had a different feel than the cartoon, was good. I mean, we've mentioned The Boys a couple times. I know The Boys is not the same idea as this, but I think it still fits. It's that same kind of like off-kilter superhero series or story that's well worth visiting. Now, again, The Boys is a totally different angle and arc than this takes, but if you like this idea, but you don't necessarily need it to be as funny as this, and you kind of want it to go farther in the adult-oriented section, then The Boys is great. I think that
or Watchmen, even. I mean, that's it's all in the same continuum of just, I think what grounds this continuum, whether it's comedy or super serious like the other ones we mentioned, is that really it is just, except for The Boys, but it is just pretty much real people doing real things.
Using the patented Movie Smash rating system, formerly known as the Fergel system, how would you rate this movie?
I'm going to give it a thumb along with a fork.
I was going to say I'll give it a thumb, fork. Instead it's my thumb that no one can see unless you're looking at it. One thumb.
That's it. My boy, I think that's such a great idea.
And I'll give it a thumbs up as well. Another thing I love about this movie, sorry, we're completely off script here, but it really feels like they had fun making it. Though I know behind the scenes it wasn't so cheerful and so great. But I mean, like the director, he brought in all his buddies to be background characters, like his surfing buddies in the background somewhere. Like listening to him doing the commentary, he was like, "Yeah, that's my buddy I surf with." Or those people are all from commercials I directed with at one time. In fact, Michael Bay is in this movie. Do you guys realize that?
No, who's Michael Bay?
He's one of the frat guys. He's the leader of the frat gang.
That's awesome. I did not know that, but that would make sense.
CeeLo Green's in this.
That's the goody mob. Actually, it's the not so goody mob.
The not so goody mob. Yep, exactly. Like it's full of these little cameos of people. Like if you know anything, if you see anything about commercials, they're all cameos from commercials and stuff. Like Ben Stiller when he first gets to the junkyard, that lady that owns the junkyard he's yelling at, she's from a commercial. Thumbs up from me. Go see this movie. People should go watch this thing. Before we finish up, though, we should go through a sort of mailbag. This is not really a mailbag. This is a review. I finally figured out how to go look up our reviews.
Oh, don't ever do that. That's not good.
It all starts.
Here's the first one I found. If you're looking for a podcast reviewing films based on comic books, this is the podcast for you. Great banter, trivia, and review. What more could you want? Highly recommend. Ben B from Australia.
Oh, well, that's nice.
Well, yeah, I will definitely take that. So we're starting positive before we get to the mean tweets.
Well, I'm saving those till later. So, guys, just a little sort of like data thing for you. What country do you think has our most listeners outside the U.S.?
I'm going to say Australia.
I'm going to go with North Korea. There's no chance.
You are both wrong. Well, we do have 2 from Russia, but anyway. We have, so it's Canada is our number 2 and Australia is our number 3, but they're really close. So if you're listening from Australia, just got to find a few more friends to listen. You'll take the number 2 spot. You're really close.
That's perfect.
So what do you got?
I'll say good day. Good day, y'all.
Oh,
good
please don't. You'll scare them all away. So what are you guys currently reading? What are you working on? And where can people find you?
Well, you can definitely reach me up. We're putting out a new website, GothamKnights.com. So we're kind of moving some things around, and still working. I've got a couple products in the fire. I'm reading right now. I'm actually reading Savage Hulk. I've been reading a bunch of different books and just kind of going through in some uniquely. I'm kind of diving back into a lot of my TPBs, kind of reading back in my trade paperbacks. But yeah, that's what we're doing. I'm still working on a few things, and probably over the next 6 months, you'll start seeing some different branding opportunities and different. I'm actually hopefully going to create a comic book pretty soon. I'm working on a couple folks with that right now as well.
As far as reading, when this comes out, I guess it'll been out for a couple weeks, but the newest Last Ronin book just started. That's excellent. I know we covered that a little bit when we talked about our Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles episode. And I was like, oh, I better check out the Last Ronin. And I did, and I read all of it. And now the new one just started. So that's great. As far as where to find me and things I'm doing, if you go to retrovania.net, that's all the home of all things Retrovania. And on all of our platforms, pretty much, we've been talking a lot about Final Fantasy VII to get ready for the recently released Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, kind of the middle section of Final Fantasy VII that was redone. We went back and looked at the original Advent Children movie. We talked about Dirge of Cerberus for the PS2. We talked about Remake to get ready for Rebirth. And I'm sure we'll still be talking about it on current episodes of the show if you find it now.
For me, I've recently picked up the omnibus for Hellboy. I'm trying to read through that. Ever since our episode on that movie, I've been very interested in the character, and I want to find out more about who he is actually like. Now, for those of you who follow us on Instagram or Facebook, you know I put up clips of the show and put that with some of the footage for the movie. I also released a fun little trailer for our episode the week before it drops. On the website, I've recently added a tab where you can find all those trailers. Please check those out. Let me know what you think. And always, you can find me over at Off Panel Creations, where we're always trying to do something interesting. Thank you for joining us today. If you enjoy the show, please give us a review and share with your friends. If you want to drop us a note, tell us how wrong we are, or make a movie suggestion, visit us at movie-smash.com. If you scroll all the way down to the bottom of the page, you'll find a form down there where you can submit those requests to us. And once again, thank you for listening.
And hey, if you're around with us, we'll see you spoon.
That's terrible.
No! Did you really just say I'll see you spoon? That is phenomenal. Not terrible. Thank you, Jerry. That's a great way to end that. S.W. Rogers might say, you folked it up. Yeah.
If you enjoyed the show, please give us a review and share with your friends. If you want to drop us a note, tell us where we were wrong, or give us a movie suggestion, visit us at movie-smash.com.